Thank you for joining Brad Nickason and myself, Nancy Furness, for this episode of We've Got Issues. We've Got Issues is a nonpartisan, citizens-based forum where we look at topics of interest to the Tri-Cities residents, and we also serve as a way to help elected representatives stay in contact with their constituents. And today we're filming on site at Coquitlam City Council chambers, and I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional and unceded territories of the Coquitlam First Nations. Also like to express our gratitude to Tri-Cities Community Television for filming our episodes. Today we're joined by City Councillor Steve Kim, and we're looking forward to talking to Steve and learning more about his duties as City Councillor. So thank you so much for joining us today, Steve.
Well, thank you, Nancy. Brad, thank you very much for having me. I'd also like to just acknowledge quickly that we are on the traditional and unceded territory of the Coquitlam and Coast Salish peoples as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. And I think maybe the best place is just to jump right in, and if you can tell us a little bit about your background and maybe let us know what inspired you to run for City Council.
Well, you know, it's certainly for myself, you know, how far should I go back?
Go back as far as you like.
Yeah. You know, it's my parents were, you know, one of the first Koreans to immigrate to Canada back in the late 60s, and so my dad set up shop in the Lower Mainland, and I was born in East Vancouver and you know, so we had a pretty interesting childhood. Full of diversity at that point in time, and eventually when he started his own businesses, he was a restaurateur and a grocery store, a Korean food store owner. That from a very young age, I started to get quite influenced in seeing small business and mom and pops at work. And we lived in Strathcona for some time before we moved to Coquitlam in 1981. I was in grade 3. And currently our family still has the same house, just right next to in Meadowbrook, right next to Riverview Lands there. So it's been amazing to see. I have 3 generations now of my family living, working, and going to school in the Tri-Cities in Coquitlam. For me, after graduation, I went out east for my undergrad, and then this was now kind of in the mid-90s, and moved back before going to Korea for grad school, and studied venture-backed venture technology and startup industries, and started working in the tech sector at that point in time before moving back to the Lower Mainland at the end of '99. And to me, at that point, I was set on the tech sector, but something happened in 2003 where I started getting involved volunteering for the community. And that essentially was what put me on a path to where I am today. The volunteering side provided a lot of different types of satisfaction for me, and knowing that I was giving back, that I started to get more involved with various groups and causes. You know, and that's eventually what was the tipping point, and I would say, I guess 2013 when I started really looking into politics at that point in time. But one thing I know about being in Coquitlam is that serving the community is really what inspires me to run back 2 years ago. And when I moved back to Coquitlam, I stopped going downtown to work. And one thing I noticed was that I was saving at least an hour or 2 a day, saving also money that I could save or whatnot. And part of this was that inspiration then to see if this is something that we could do for Coquitlam and for more Coquitlam, so that we have that option of living and working here with some sustainable growth in that way. And that's another element that inspired me to run for council.
You were trying to encourage the city of Coquitlam to expand the kind of business it does here to make it a much more, to give it an atmosphere that did more of what they were doing downtown, to bring it out to Coquitlam, and in that process, it would become a much more sustainable world in a sense, because there would be presumably less travel back and forth.
Absolutely.
So creating opportunities here in the Tri-City.
Yes, yes. And certainly a Coquitlam type model, one that works well here, but really that the ability to save time and of course the cost associated with that type of movement and back and forth, I feel also helps people with their quality of lives. You know, you can spend more time with your family and friends as well. So.
Yeah, I agree. I worked from home for about the last year of my career, and it makes a huge difference. That extra 3 hours a day really, you know, as far as fatigue goes, stress, money, time, it's something well worth looking into for sure. Can you tell us maybe a little bit about how it's going as a city councillor, like what you've learned on your first year or two, and what the experience has been like? Just give us sort of a general idea.
Yeah, I would love to. It's an amazing experience. It's the greatest honor of my life to be able to serve on this council. And the past 2 years, I would say the first year was, you know, you go from, it's a life-changing decision and results, and so, and also you're going through a period of learning. I felt like a kid at a brand new school, and it was very exciting. And, you know, for myself, from, you know, coming from the tech side and small business to working with nonprofits and community, those elements, you know, I have a vast experience in. But then suddenly getting into urban design, you know, and other areas that really, you know, from infrastructure and the, you know, from the roads, you're learning that there are really so many different elements. So I really wanted to take the time to fully grasp and understand the concepts and the strategies and programs in place. So it was just a wonderful first year. Of course, going into the second led into the current situation with the pandemic, and it's you know, it's certainly been a roller coaster of a year. But I can only speak volumes of first with the city and the response and making sure that we were safe and getting the right information out and supporting our small businesses and whatnot. But I can't say enough about number two, and that's our community and just seeing everyone coming together. That in itself has been tremendous to see and just to witness as well. We certainly live in a pretty incredible community here in Coquitlam.
Yes, for sure. And I think that gives us a really sort of good idea of the flavor of your first 2 years in council. You were saying that it's a very steep learning curve. How did you learn? Were you learning on your own, or were there other ways that you were learning about everything as well?
You certainly you're left to your own devices, but the city has a great process to onboard new councillors. So we did go through some intensive training sessions, and also there are some organizations like the Lower Mainland LGA, which brings all the elected officials to also give additional education and training and development. But for the most part as well, it's also relying on my fellow council colleagues to get insight and history, because you're coming in to some of these, into some process here that has had maybe 3, 4, 5 years of development in that process to get to where we are, and we're asked to make pretty major decisions. So you can't take that lightly, and certainly try to do as much research as possible.
A certain amount of the decisions you're making are decisions that are based on councils previous to you. So you have to continue that. So that's got to be That's got to be a tricky situation to be in, because how do you keep the intent of what somebody else has already decided, but yet if you come to it with new concerns, how do you interject that sort of thing?
It's very true, and there are two sides to that for sure. Because one, you realize that you are carrying the torch, and you're also realizing some of the the major decisions and process was put in place by those before us, before me, and then how to give it the respect of knowing that how much effort has been put into the process to date. To come in, you got to respect where you are in that, but knowing that you can also discuss and bring forth experiences that you might have that might add to a different perspective. But from what I found, in a lot of cases, they have been included in previous discussions as well. So, it's certainly one where you have to, at least for myself, I just wanted to make sure I was paying the right respect to that, but also knowing we were elected. When it's time to have the additional input that makes sense for that decision, people will also welcome that as well.
Because you've campaigned on certain ideas, and you've told a constituent of supporters that you're going to bring these sensibilities to council. It's got to be pretty tough to know that you've made this one promise, or that you've agreed to them that you would bring these things up, but now you're faced with lots of information, lots of decisions that have already been made. I got to imagine at times that you must feel like your hands are tied and there aren't things that you can do. Have you found that?
Well, there's certainly elements where once you're in the role, you learn that maybe the information in the public realm was only a certain percentage, and then you find out more information, and a lot of times having that full, well-rounded kind of pool of information helps to lead you within, in a lot of ways, a similar result. But with that being said, with the values that you bring in some of those ideas, they remain constant, and they might not be part of the first round as I got into things, but they're now being presented and those ideas are being constant. So over time, my hope is if they're not being implemented into the process right away, there is a pathway forward so that they are incorporated moving forward.
And at least considered. So that's something that, so I'm kind of trying to imagine myself as somebody who might want their ideas represented on council, and I've campaigned for and I've helped get someone elected. I shouldn't necessarily be frustrated if I don't see all of their sensibilities reflected immediately, because it's a process over time that changes council. Am I close on that?
Yeah, I would say so, and certainly a strong part of it. There are some things that require and demand immediate change, but in the circumstance over the last 2 years, at least 2 years ago, it was really there was a lot more continuation of things that were happening. Now you're seeing some change. There's a push on the diversity, equity, and inclusion side of it, and I got to thank Councillor Mandewa on that. She's really been a leader in that type of that voice, and so it's great to see those types of ideas and concepts and programs be integrated into what we're doing.
When a change like that happens, and that's a really good example, diversity, when a change like that happens, is that because there's a real appetite at the time, or can a councillor, a first-time councillor, bring that up? And I'm not sure of the situation with Councillor Madeo. Was that something that she pushed forward as a?
I think it was certainly top of mind for all of council. you started thinking about, at the start of the pandemic with the anti-Asian racism sentiment that was coming out in certain areas and other parts, and trying to understand where, I guess, some feeling was going, and how do we as a team, as a city, as a council, work to embrace it, understand what was going on, but also make sure that we're all on the same page in denouncing, and also how do we work to eradicate it or mitigate it in the future, so that we have a stronger foundation at council. And so when the idea was brought up, it was a time where it clicked and people were ready to really see it through.
There were signals out in society that brought that subject forward, and then it was a really good timing. Timing has something to do with that. That makes sense. So, so because you brought it up, I'm really interested. How did I want to know, if you don't mind, your experience with regards to the racism, and what did that look like was it Coquitlam, or was it outside of this area? Coquitlam, the Tri-Cities, or was it
I would say it was in a broader context. Certainly, me personally, I didn't have too many experiences during this time frame, but certainly know a lot of people who have. In the Lower Mainland, there were certainly some instances where people were posting some of their experiences in Coquitlam and the Tri-Cities as well. But a lot of the more, I guess, ones that hit the news were probably in other areas of the Lower Mainland. But it's certainly something that got me to act. I remember in May during Asian Heritage Month, I was allowed to speak and give a talk on the anti-Asian racist rhetoric that was going on, and denouncing those types of words and actions, and have since started to notice and work with a couple organizations out there to basically combat the trend that was happening.
Are those local?
A couple of them were local, but some of them national as well. The Vancouver Asian Film Festival set out on a campaign with a hashtag eliminate hate, and so that started locally. Another hashtag, health not hate, was one with the Asian community to show support for frontline and frontline workers, and especially those in healthcare. And another national one, Act to End Racism. I believe it might have started in Alberta, but unsure, but still has a national scope. So started working with those in the community, and with one gentleman, a friend of mine, Jack Jin, he had a message of unity. And he's a philanthropist, and we worked to show this by supporting the healthcare workers he gave pretty generous, I guess, donations. First, we started with Burnaby Hospital and gave $10,000 there for their hospital, and then moved on to Eagle Ridge Hospital as well with $10,000 and the Taiwanese community, the Chamber of Commerce in particular, the Taiwan Chamber of Commerce donated 50,000 masks to Eagle Ridge Hospital as well as part of that effort.
This is all at a time when we were, I'm presuming, when there was a shortage of PPE and things like that.
I would say certainly the effort started at the beginning when there was a major shortage. A lot of the delivery happened a little bit later on as well, though. Yeah. And it's still ongoing, I would say. Yeah.
Is there some way that council, we know Coquitlam's a very diverse community. Is there some way that council is working to sort of have that inclusiveness and to combat discrimination or racism from a council level?
I would say so. At every instance where either it's through public presentation or in council chambers or even on social media, each and every one of my council colleagues are, very supportive. They're leaders in also the equity and diversity inclusion type mandate as well. Whether it's and they are quite vocal, I would say, in denouncing instances of hate or discrimination as well. So I'm quite proud to serve with them and to work with them on that for sure.
I guess, can you if we could move on a little bit and tell us a little bit more about your duties as a city councillor and some of the committees or the projects that you're working on, just some of the main ones or the ones that really excite you?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's quite vast. I've been fortunate to serve on some great committees, both at the city level and as an external representative. I was, part of the Culture Services Advisory Committee, which includes all our arts, culture, and heritage organizations and artists and others in the community. Brad is on that, representing the Evergreen Cultural Center. Just fantastic, certainly for myself, having worked a bit in the arts and in the creative space. It was right up my alley, and it was great to work with everyone on that. Also served on the Riverview Lands Advisory Committee. We got 1 year of that, but it was, for someone who grew up next to the Riverview Lands, it was still so educational. Terry and Marilyn and others who are part of the Riverview Horticultural Society, they were able to take me on tours, some of them just to give me some extra time so I could really educate myself, and then also yourself, Nancy, and seeing being there at Finney's Garden that was a highlight for me, and with Norma and Don Gillespie there. Because even growing up, I didn't know Finney's Garden existed. And
it's a lot of history.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I also serve on the Coquitlam River Watershed Roundtable, and that's something I've embraced. I really appreciate the effort of all the members to basically be stewards of our watershed and the lands that surround them. I've gotten quite involved in the roundtable as well. Also serve as alternate for Tri-Cities Healthier Communities Partnership and the Tri-Cities Food Security Table. Those have been great opportunities for me to learn more about what's happening at the ground level with our community as well, and seeing everyone who's working tirelessly at those levels.
I think it's interesting. Could you tell us a little bit more about the food security? Because I think that's something that is increasingly of relevance at the local or municipal level as we see climate change, we see, crises such as COVID. Food security is always looming and always an important topic. Is there anything you can share with us on what you're working on with that committee?
I would say that it's still in the early days. Essentially, the terms of reference and the organization and the meetings started within the last year, maybe in the last 8 or 9 months. But through that effort, some funding was also received, I believe, from the province. And that was because Port Moody's involved, POCO and Coquitlam, and I would have to give some props to Councillor Lubick in Port Moody, who was a good driving force in securing some of that funding and working with our staff as well. So at this point, it's been more from what as an alternate, I don't get to go to all of them just with my schedule, but there have been lots of meetings and seeing the stakeholders and a lot of information gathering and ideation, so to see what makes sense for the Tri-Cities. Outside of certainly some amazing groups that are working to get food delivered to various people in our community. But I'm hopeful one day we can have more of these gardens. and find some more sustainable means at the local level.
So advocating for community gardens and things like that as well. I just am curious, how do you get on these committees? Is it because you have an interest in a certain area, or are you assigned to certain committees, or a combination?
I would say a combination of both. You know, I was Councillor Zarillo is the main representative, and through discussions and I guess my involvement with the Tri-Cities Healthier Communities Partnership, I was able, my name was recommended or brought up, I guess, at that point.
So you're nominated sometimes in
yeah,
a way?
I don't know if it's at least suggested.
Suggested, recommended or suggested.
So, but another way, and for the advisory committees, that is a mix. Either you know, something that people feel that they want to learn, try something new, or they have some experiences that maybe they can bring to the table right away.
So do you volunteer, or are you assigned by the mayor?
Oh no, these are volunteer, but also they're not assigned. They are going. There is a discussion on them and a process at the council level.
And so would all of the councillors have a role like that on some committee, like of some sort?
I would say so, pretty much. At varying degrees, because there are only so many spots. But yeah, I would say every single one is involved with a committee or an external representation as well.
Right. So what happens at a committee level like that? So what for people who don't have the opportunity to, or who don't go out and participate in committees like that, what happens in those committees? What kind of decisions are made?
Well, you know, certainly they are advisory committees where residents or other stakeholders with the city provide feedback and guidance on some city initiatives. So you will also see outside of, from my experience so far, is that a lot of information on maybe a new policy or strategy that the city is implementing or at least devising. It would come to the advisory committee for a presentation and then receive some feedback. You get some feedback back to the staff to incorporate that type of engagement and interaction. But at the same time, there are times where you know, some of the advisory committees will put forth a recommendation back to council. And in those instances, when we are at council and we're about to approve the minutes, in that process, there might be a recommendation from the committee, and then there's a discussion and then a vote at the council level on that recommendation. So there is that piece that allows the advisory committee to also provide some action.
And there's community input. Did I understand that correctly? At the advisory committee level, that sometimes there are members of the public that are part of those committees?
Well, I would say it's, I guess, part of the kind of the engagement process. Members of the public, I believe at some of them, like the Riverview Lands Advisory Committee, was open to the public. And I remember during that first year, sometimes there wouldn't be enough seats. But others, I would think that if they're open, they must be open. But I haven't seen too many non-members at the advisory committees. But usually they are trying to get the feedback from the members.
And sorry, if I could just circle back, there was one other committee that sounded really interesting to me that I'd like to hear more about if you can share something with us. The Healthier Communities. Can you tell us a little bit about what happens in that committee and what the mandate of that is, what you're trying to achieve there?
It's a lot of information sharing. There's a strong leadership and representation from Fraser Health. And then you have a lot of our, again, the three cities, I guess up to with the Tri-Cities, you're looking at various organizations from the seniors to the new immigrants to what have you. And we're all at this round table, and there's a lot of information sharing, presentations that are coming, discussions of what's happening in each respective community or association, and then some dialogue on what can be done, and maybe perhaps point some research into some areas as well. So
It's interesting because it's like Tri-Cities and the Health Authority and different members, so there's almost like a synergy, and everybody has the ability to put in their own ideas and input and then bring it back to their own community.
yeah, I would say so. Most definitely, there's it's a very the members of the partnership are very active, and that type of discussion and the information sharing, I think, goes a long way to whether it's, certainly COVID was top of mind, but there was also, vaping for youth, and, a number of different topics that we as a community need to tackle. So those stakeholders that are there are able to bring that to people in their areas.
And then, as a member of that committee, whether you chair it or not, you then bring that back to council, so that the council is informed on what's going on at that level.
Yes, I would say more, because there's also staff representation there. So there is that staff level engagement that, that between the cities, but also with Fraser Health, and letting them do their work. But we do report back to, all of us do, on all the different external committees that we serve on, to inform our colleagues of what's going on.
It's interesting. You were saying that there's staff members that are also part of these committees and groups. How do you interact with, what is your relationship between staff and yourself, city staff and yourself on these committees?
These committees, I would say it's still not too in depth. I believe, for instance, before my time with the Tri-Cities Healthier Community Partnerships, it was broken into the policy group and then the working group. And, the staff would be at the working group, and the elected officials would be at the policy group. And to kind of make sure that people who require and give the right information are talking with each other. But as certainly we would support each other and having a discussion before or after. But also, there is some synergy there, but we also have to ensure that staff are, working on the areas that they should.
So that, it sounds like staff is like operations and you're more the policy, so you're saying you say what to do and they figure out how to do it?
I would say more along the lines of that, yeah. It's certainly we want the people with the right backgrounds and experience to be doing the work, just like when I think about with our staff during this pandemic, and a lot of people might not know, but we had an emergency office that was created by staff, and we were I feel in good, strong hands from the get-go, because they really did alter and focus on what needed to be done, and we were letting the experts do their jobs.
So, as a new councillor coming in, you had easily a year to start to acclimatize yourself to city council, but at the same time, all of a sudden a pandemic hits, and that's got to be a whole new ballgame. How did you feel about your relationship with staff through the whole thing, from the day one? What's your relationship been with the staff that's been here for years? So you're a new person coming in. You're a councillor. You represent the people. What's that transition been like for you?
I would have to say it's been incredible. We have incredible people in our staff. I think about all the different organizations and my experience in team building and also organizational culture, I'm certainly everyone can look at me as biased, but I would have to say the City of Coquitlam and the organizational culture here is incredible. It's top tier, and so having the right people in place, it's been very welcoming. There's the right process, the right types of communication, and so I felt always welcomed.
So you feel like your ideas and the things that you want to do have been supported and at least heard.
Oh yes, yes. And in addition to and this is one thing that really does somewhat surprise me when you think about all the emails that you can get, our staff is so responsive. So even if a resident was to email one of my council mates or myself directly, I received that email and I will forward it to staff. There's a response back. Even I would have to, to be honest, before getting into government, I would think I wasn't writing City Hall every day or anything like that, but you would kind of think that, well, it's a big organization. Will they really ever care about me? And I would have to say, yes. You get a response, and it's incredible that level of engagement.
Is your perception of government prior to going into it different than your perception having been there for 2 years?
I would say, that's a yes and no, I guess, because I didn't really know how to perceive it. My experience in my career has always been with pretty small organizations. I come from the startup and the tech side of things, so if it got to 60 people, it was large for me. So to me, just the concept of what a large organization such as City Hall and the city staff was kind of still, I really didn't have too much experience with it, so I didn't know what to expect. But I will have to say, with all the different departments and this, and the ability that how they've set it up to collaborate and work with each other is quite impressive. And that I do have to give a lot of credit to the city manager too, Mr. Pete Steblin. He's brought in the right people.
That's nice to hear that all the players seem to be on the same team. You seem to be well supported and working together with all the different entities that are involved. Can you tell us what's your favorite part about the job? Like, what is it the people? Is it one of your roles? What do you really find inspiring and about your role as city councillor?
It's certainly, it is about the people. I can't think of a better way to serve and to give back to the community at every level. It's knowing that and just how at the end of the day we're growing as a city. How do we manage this together and also know that everyone is working and doing their best for the right reasons. To me, that is the biggest thing with me over the past 2 years. But to bring it outside of that, one thing I do love is when we pave a new road. I love going to the new road, and this might sound silly, and when you think, it does come back to the core services a bit. Like when I just love looking at the new road for people. Case in point, Laurentian. I used to go up Laurentian all the time, and it had all those squiggly kind of repairs. But when it got the new pavement, to me, that was kind of like, okay, some of our decisions and what we're doing, we're seeing those results quite quickly, and so that was pretty amazing to me as well, to see that what we decide on can have almost immediate effects.
Right, see the idea, the thought, and then the result. It's something very tangible. What is your sort of proudest achievement, or what do you feel that you've accomplished so far as city councillor that you're really proud of?
Yeah, you know, that's you know, it's an interesting question for me, because so much of what we do on council is, you know, there are 9 of us, and nothing gets done unless we all work together. So how to distinguish, you know, when some actions are happening, when at the end of the day, it's because I serve on this council and we're all doing it together. But you know, with that being said, I think about, you know, with COVID, and it's certainly, you know, what an incredible year. You know, there's with our small businesses and what's happening, and with some of our residents, with our nonprofits. It was encouraging and for me that we all work together and to get that $5 million community support and recovery program in place, and so that we have this ability to basically support those that require it from this year and into next. And I'm really hoping that our ability to have that is going to pay a lot of, it's going to help a lot of people. And if that's the case, I'm extremely proud of that. And on a personal side, not so much as a councillor, because I am proud that it's part of the recovery plan, but as a community volunteer, I've been, since March, where the city has had a seniors meals delivery program, and I'm extremely proud that of the team, and I've been out there every week since March delivering meals, and you know, and our staff and the volunteers, they've been just as committed. And I know everyone, my council mates, they go out, but for me, this is just something that I've just been very proud and honored to do week in and week out.
Now that you're a seasoned veteran, and you've worked out all the kinks, I think that we'd be interested to know what it is that you want to see in the next couple of years of your time on council.
Yeah, you know, it's a good question, and you know, it's hard to answer at times for me, just because I know that first and foremost, in 2 years we have to be out of this, or hopefully on the right path, and COVID is in the rear view mirror, because you know, anything to do with our economy or anything else has to do with our health, and so hopefully. With, you know, it's great that you know, the rollout of the vaccine is happening, and you know, there's some encouraging signs for 2021. But number one, my goal for in 2 years is that our city and our people and our communities are past this, and we're on the pathway forward. That small businesses are not hurting, our local businesses in general. And that our nonprofits are, you know, able to also ensure that their funding and their work is being done. And that to me is priority one. It's hard to think of anything else. Certainly when you look at the greater context, you know, we got to get more of the right housing into our city. You know, the housing affordability strategy, which started 3 years prior to my term. We're now in year 5. You know, we have over 5,100 rental units in stream. Roughly just over 900 of them are non-market, below market. And so how do we continue to get those out? And while that's happening, you know, with our environmental stewardship, there's been some great work going around, even with our staff, on mass timber, with looking at the step code and how that we as a city can do our part to hit our targets and lower our GHGs. And hope, as even with our downtown kind of plan that we're looking at, how do we really get people out of their cars and be able to do this within a walking community or an active transportation community that you know, they can really truly enjoy, and brings it back to what I was always looking for, and to get people out of the commute and really enjoying their time here. You know, some other aspirations would be, you know, how do we get more seniors housing? You know, certainly, and not only seniors housing, but working with the other levels of government, but also seniors housing that can work with community groups that maybe English are not their first language, or the cuisine as well. And food is a big part of it, and would certainly love to see how we can get that type of housing in our community. And so much more. I can go on, but first and foremost, again, I don't mean to ramble, but we just need to get past COVID.
So, okay, and I agree with you. The COVID is an impediment to so much right now, especially economy-based. So I think the final thing that I'd like to ask you is, like, what would you say to people that, like, what can they do? Because this comes down to how we behave to a certain extent. What could they do to make sure that we get back to normal somewhat, as you described?
I think, well, use some common sense, and let's be good to each other. You know, I'm looking at you know, the next 4 weeks with the Christmas holidays, and you know, my parents live only a few minutes away, my brother's family, and we've already resigned. We're resuming our Christmas, and yet it's the only way forward for this little sacrifice that we can do. And I would certainly hope that everyone can really take stock and be fortunate that we are at least in a situation where we have a strong public health office that's helping to set the right guidelines, and you know, and as a city, for us as an elected official, that we know that we're letting the experts do their job. But really, it's about taking a step back, realizing that we got to sacrifice a little bit, and you know, supporting small businesses and local businesses with some takeout will go a long way as well. And just know that the light is coming at the end of the tunnel, is showing through right now. So this is you know, when we should show our resolve and stay home.
Well, Steve, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you very much for coming and talking to us as a first-time councillor. I think you've shown us some really fabulous insight into what it's like to be a first-time person on a council and go through that process of understanding the ropes so that you can do the job, the people's work, so to speak. Thank you very much for being here. We'd also like to thank you for taking the time to watch this program with Councillor Kim, joining myself, Brad Nickason, and my friend and co-host Nancy Furness. This program is We've Got Issues. It's just a small community program in the Tri-Cities that's meant to give people an insight into how our communities work and the people who are doing that work. Again, thank you, Councillor Kim, and thanks to our friends at Tri-City Community TV for giving us this opportunity to put this on the air. Thank you once again for joining us.